Greetings, everyone, and welcome to the Produce Buzzers podcast. We are so happy you have joined us today, and I think you will be too after the show is over, because you will learn a lot about fresh fruits and vegetables, how to select and store them, how to prepare and cook them, and surprising facts about their history and origin. We hope it inspires you to eat more fresh fruits and vegetables, not only for your health, but also for your delight and pleasure as you explore their amazing world of taste and delicious flavors. Eating more of them will transform your life in so many positive ways. So settle back, relax, and get ready for another delicious adventure with the Produce Buzzers. Greetings and welcome to another delicious episode of the Produce Buzzers podcast. I'm Edwin Stepp, your host and executive editor of ProduceBuzz.com. I'm joined once again by the president and founder of Produce Buzz, Teresa Nolan, along with Rick Stepp and Cynthia Benedetto, both contributing editors to Produce Buzz. Now, Produce Buzzers podcast fans, we have another very special guest joining us this week. As our regular listeners know, we love to feature family farms on our program to help dispel the myth that agriculture in the United States is all huge corporations. In fact, according to a USDA report in 2022, of the 2 million farms in the U.S., almost 98% of them are family farms, with most of them considered small to mid-size. Our guest this week is a third-generation farmer of a family farm that has been growing citrus in Florida for almost 100 years. It is a testament to their hard work and dedication to keep that land in production. To do so over those many years, they have faced overwhelming odds created by adverse weather, devastating pests and diseases, and perhaps the greatest pressure of all, escalating real estate and land costs. Many farms in Florida have given in to that latter factor, especially when the first two factors became too much. How much easier it would be to just sell the land for commercial and residential development and walk away with millions of dollars and away from all those hardships. So today we welcome Quentin Roe, president of William G. Roe Sons, a vertically integrated grower, packer, and marketer of fresh citrus, specializing in tangerines. They are based in Winter Haven, Florida, and own the Noble brand of citrus, which is prominent in grocery stores across the U.S. Quentin started working in his family business alongside his brothers in the 1980s. He has worked in all segments of the citrus industry: growing, packing, harvesting, marketing, and a lot of the industry and government organizations. So he knows the business well. Those organizations include over 40 years on the board of Florida Citrus Packers Association, during which he served as a president at various times for many years. He also served on the board of the Florida Fruit and Vegetable Association since 2005. These are just a few of the organizations to which he has lent his valuable time and expertise in order to help the farmers across Florida. On a trip to New York City in the late 1980s, Quentin saw a new citrus fruit being imported into the U.S., which impressed him so much that he was inspired to create a similar citrus fruit that he could grow in Florida. We will learn about that today, and you'll want to stick around to hear the story, because when you find out about this delicious treat and search them out and then taste them, you will be amazed at their juiciness and their flavor. Welcome to the show, Quentin. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for inviting me. This will be a lot of fun.
Yes, we like to have fun. So I'm sure it will be. I can tell already you've got a lot of knowledge to share with us, and probably some very interesting stories. But before we jump into that special fruit you're going to tell us about today, not just one, we're going to hear about several, but tell us more about your background and growing up on a family farm.
If I went all the way back to my grandfather's era, there's a funny, interesting little story there. He was from upstate New York on the Hudson River, and his business was cutting ice into 300-pound ice blocks, and They would store those ice blocks along the river in ice houses and cover them with sawdust. And then during the summer, when the ice melted, they would transport that ice down to New York City, to various parts of the city. his part of the city supply just happened to be the Water Street Market, which was, we talk about Hunts Point today, but back then it was the Water Street Market.
Oh, the same location, same
No
place?
different location,
Okay.
pure.
Yeah. Yeah.
So he got in the habit as a very young man, I'm talking about late teens, early 20s, of taking the local farmers' produce, which was the breadbasket for New York City up in the Hudson River Valley, right?
Yeah.
And he would take their apples, peaches, pears, whatever was seasonal at the time, put it with his ice boat and transport it down to the city, trade with the people that were using his ice in the Water Street Market, and then take the money back up to the farmers. So that was his business for, we're not sure exactly what year he jumped, and we're not even sure exactly why he made the jump, but he jumped to Florida, and there was this fledgling citrus business in the late teens, early 20s down here. And he started buying from these, doing the same thing that he was doing with those farmers in the Hudson Valley. He would trade with the farmers and get their fruit. But back then it was all packed in wicker baskets with moss on it. And all the fruit was transported out to the coasts and then loaded on steamships. And the steamships would take it up to the ports along the East Coast, and he focused on New York City, where he knew these traders. That's how my grandfather got his start.
Wow.
During the late teens and early 20s, you had seaboard coastline. You had the railroads going down each coast. So Platte going down the West Coast, and thus Tampa and all that area got developed. And you had Flagler going down the East Coast, all the way down ultimately to the Keys, right? So he developed out St. Augustine and then West Palm and all that, right? Those are old stories. But going on down in the center part of the state, all the wood for the huge expansion that was going on in North Florida and on up into Atlanta and whatnot was the wood that was being harvested out of Central and South Florida. The railroads were cutting all this huge timber, old gigantic pine, old gigantic cypress. And once they had that logged out, well, that's when the citrus industry started coming behind them and planting into all that deforested sand land. That sounded good. So the railroad recognized this fledgling business that was going on, and they started going to prominent growers and prominent shippers and saying, we will build you a packing house if you will switch your transportation from the steamship lines over to the railroad lines.
Wow.
And they approached my grandfather, and they built my grandfather a packing house. Sounds so crazy today, doesn't it? Isn't that just ludicrous?
Yeah, it does.
So that got my grandfather jump-started into the packing house business in 1925, 6, somewhere along in there.
Wow. Wow.
That's still the same facility. Excuse me.
No, that's all right. I was going to ask though about the railroad. That was prior to refrigerated rail cars, I imagine, right? But I guess citrus isn't too crucial to be refrigerated.
But they did have those ice cars.
Oh, right. Okay. So
and
they
you
wouldn't
filled up either end of those ice cars, ice boxes, as they call them, with ice in either end. And the transportation moving forward blew that cold through the cart. So yes, that's how
that's kind of a full circle then from the ice business back to that anyway.
So that was the environment that my father and grandfather grew up in, and they focused on really developing out a lot more growth for the company to kind of support the packing house for a year-round program. They really started to focus on tangerines, where my grandfather had been more focused on oranges early on.
Okay.
That tangerine business grew, and all the trials and tribulations that went along with freezes during those 40s, 50s, 60s. My oldest brother got into the business in 75 or 76. 77 was the year that it snowed in Florida. I mean, like really meaningful snow. I
Wow.
remember being at college and dad going, "Oh, son, I don't know." I got all these letters and pictures of snow, and it was pretty crazy.
Yeah.
But from a very early age, I think the same is true for both of my brothers and the sisters that went into the business. We knew we wanted to be in this business. It
Yeah.
was just a fun business. Mom and dad lived the business. They all sent us off to college to get good liberal arts educations. And the whole message was learn how to critically think and then figure out what you want to do with your lives. Well, we'd already figured out what we wanted to do with our lives. And
Wow.
I think the business made us good critical thinkers. But so I graduated college in 1980 and immediately went to work for the family business. There were 7 kids. So we did a lot of that. Uh, Same thing y'all are talking about doing. I mean, for 40 years working with your brothers and sisters, it was just about at least 30 years there. It was every time you get together, you're talking about fruit.
Right.
And where'd you go to college?
A little school up in Ohio, as far away from Winter Haven, Florida as I could get. It's called College of Wooster in Wooster, Ohio. It wasn't even as big as my high school. There was only 1,600 kids
Oh,
in
wow.
the college. And but I got very lucky there. I met my child bride, and we've been married for 42 years.
Oh, fantastic. That's great. Good news. Yeah.
So
That's
1980, I graduated and went into the business and never had a second thought about it.
Yeah, that's interesting. I love that story. I thought maybe you said you wanted to get away. You told us before we started that you wanted to you went as far away from Winter Haven as you could get and still be in the States, I suppose. And I thought, well, maybe he was trying to do what I was trying to do. I grew up in the we grew up in the produce business, and it was like almost 24/7 the hours. So when it came time for me to go to college, I was like, I want to get out of this business and find me a nice 9 to 5 job. But that wasn't you. You were ready to come back. So that's good to
I,
hear.
I was very ready to come back. So uh, the decade of the 1980s in Florida was what we refer to as the decade of freezes.
Oh, wow.
And during that decade, we had 5 freezes that qualified as 100-year storms, 100-year events.
Wow.
We were getting to think they weren't really 100-year events anymore, but
Right.
as I've lived the rest of my life, I appreciate what I went through, but God, it was miserable. But
Yeah.
literally, it froze out the northern half of the Florida citrus industry and basically moved the industry south of I-4.
Mm.
We rebuilt really quickly down in the LaBelle, Immokalee area, South Indian River district. It really came roaring back with huge crops in the 1990s. But that's more of a Florida orange thing. From our personal family business, we came through those freezes in reasonably good shape.
Oh,
It was a lot of right place at the right time. We did have some groves that got badly damaged, but we had enough groves who were in the right places doing the right things. We felt good about the way looking back,
yeah.
we felt good about the way we came out.
Right.
Um,
So
but
you were probably doing some techniques like maybe windmills, heaters, that kind of thing, or did you know?
Yes.
Yeah.
So I grew up as a heater pot baby. Uh, for those of you
That's
that don't
good.
know what that is, it's almost terrible in today's environmentally sensitive world to talk about what we were doing then. But these were 50 heater pots per acre. Each heater pot held 11 gallons of diesel fuel.
Mm.
And on a cold night, you were lighting half of them and saving half of them for the next night and being able to have enough resources to refill the half that you lit that night so that you could burn it the third night if there was a serious freeze, which we had a number of those, right?
Yeah.
So it wasn't until the late 90s, like the 89 freeze, probably half the industry had converted over and were using water. But those heater pot
Oh.
nights, the whole mission of a heater pot was to put out so much smoke that you created your own cloud layer and you trapped the
Oh.
heat that you were generating within that cloud layer. And that's what kept the grove warm.
Okay, so it wasn't just the heat from them. You needed that cloud layer to hold it in. That makes sense because
And it
you
was an
can't.
environmental disaster zone. I mean, I don't know if you should even produce this part, okay?
Right.
But we migrated on to water. And the whole concept behind water is citrus trees do not freeze at 32 degrees. Okay, they
Uh-huh.
freeze at a much lower temperature. The fruit will freeze somewhere 27, 28 for 4 hours, and you're starting to get some slushiness in your fruit. The
Yeah.
leaves are down in the low 20s. The wood gets on down into the teens. So if you could put out a microjet of water and direct that microjet into the crotch of the tree, you created a little microclimate, and the amount of BTUs that you were throwing off, bridge thermal units,
Yeah.
that you were throwing off,
Mhm.
converting that water into ice, liquid into solid, was enough to keep those trees above a freezing temperature. And that became the staple for our industry for
Yeah.
cold weather.
That's okay. Yeah.
So back to our new variety story. So all this freezing's going on in the 1980s. My uncle that was on the sales desk died in 82. My dad was going to give the sales to a broker, and I just held up my hand and said, Dad, I can do that good. Just give me a shot.
Right.
And I can't believe how naive I was. I can't believe how but I just out of ignorance, I had enough. I can do this. I can do this. I can do this.
That's the story of
25
so
years
many
old.
successful entrepreneurs is that they launch into something they have no idea how difficult it's going to be, what they're doing, but somehow they get through it and they make it work. So, yeah.
I just wasn't going to fail. I mean, that was the bottom line. And I made some bad sales, and I made a lot of good sales. And
Yeah.
um, the freezes actually helped in that capacity because supply went short. And if we
All
had
right.
supply, it was just a matter of having the guts to ask the right price.
Yeah.
And the industry had been in long supply so long that all these very seasoned veterans in the sales business kept selling at a cheaper price without really understanding that what the right price to market should be. Did
Yeah.
that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah.
So I didn't have all that baggage of having all those years of relationships that I had to protect at cheap prices. So
Yeah.
anyway, uh, I learned later that it wasn't just about sales; it was about marketing. And when you got
Okay.
long supply, you better be pretty good at being a partner and not just holding
Begging.
up. Yeah, yeah, exactly. Talk about today's market. Florida's always been a processed orange market. This disease that we contracted in 04-ish, called greening, is a bacterial disease that lodges in the phloem of the tree. It's um, spread by an insect called a psyllid, which in Florida is as common as a mosquito. You're
Hmm.
not getting rid of the psyllids, okay?
Right.
When a psyllid bites a tree that is infected, it becomes infected, and we call those hot psyllids, okay? They then
Interesting.
blow with the wind, and essentially by 2006, 7, after the hurricanes of '04, the entire state was infected. Whether you believe it or not, it was there. So at that point, it took probably 4 or 5 years for the trees to really start to wind down. Now, we started the beginning of that decade with 850,000 acres of citrus in the state of Florida as an industry. Today, we're somewhere in the 225,000 acres of viable citrus. So in 20 years, we've lost 75, 70, whatever that number is, percent of our industry. This disease, and we can talk about what the disease has done worldwide, but in Florida, it has been just a horrible disaster.
Maybe our listeners would like to know what is the effect of the green. I assume from the name greening, the fruit turns green, from what I understand. But is it also killing the tree? What's happening?
Okay, this is going to be your high school biology lesson real quick. It's going to be my
Okay.
elevator version.
Yeah.
So the bacterium lodges in the phloem of the tree. The phloem goes down, the xylem goes up. So photosynthesis happens in the leaves, and those leaves create carbohydrates. Those carbohydrates partially are stored in the leaves, partially are stored in the roots. Different plants, 50-50 is break off of that.
Yeah.
So the carbohydrates are supposed to go from the leaves down the phloem to the roots. The roots then take those carbohydrates, go out and forage and collect the waters, mineral, nutrient, fertilizer, transport it back up through the xylem to the leaves, and photosynthesis happens again.
Uh,
Those, with the phloem being blocked by the bacterium, it stops that carbohydrates going out to the roots. The roots atrophy back. It takes 2 or 3 years, and all of a sudden you start to see this yellowing going on up in the trees, and your top starts to atrophy back.
hmm.
It's basically the tree is starving from within.
Oh,
Okay.
yeah.
Um, we've tried everything you can imagine as farmers to try to keep those poor ailing trees alive. And it takes a lot more inputs, both feeding the leaves separately from the roots and feeding the roots separately from the leaves to try to keep that tree alive, to try to keep it producing. But the internals of the fruit that it produces continue to go down in quality.
Hmm.
That means it's worth less, particularly on where Florida's such a big such a big processing orange industry.
Yeah.
All your big major processors were down here, whether it be Minute Maid, Tropicana, Florida's Natural, several others that you remember. So all of them were struggling with the quality. As the quality just went down, they would pay less, the growers would get less, no more money to put back into the groves. They let the groves go down further. You have an off year or two from worldwide supply being oversupplied, or maybe a hurricane or two. Yuck.
Hmm.
And the net effect is you just started hemorrhaging acreage. So in the last 8 years, this state has just been hemorrhaging acreage. What made Florida such a great place to grow commercial oranges for processing was cheap land, cheap labor, cheap input costs.
Hmm.
And it just so happens that with all that, we grew great flavor, great yield, great color, great sugar solids.
Hmm.
What
What
you
we
lost?
lost with greening was bricks, color, yield, flavor, right?
Yeah.
Consequently, once you lost it, land went crazy from development and all those other things. So even though we now have a cure for greening, that happened last January, a year ago,
Oh.
we have a cure for greening. You can bring your trees back. You can plant new trees and feel like, oh, I got a path forward. Life is going to be good. But you're not going to get back that other 600,000 acres that we lost because you no longer have cheap land. You no longer have cheap labor. You no longer have cheap inputs. So all the drivers that got the citrus industry so big in Florida are gone. You
Hmm.
can't get them back. They don't
Yeah.
exist anymore.
What show were we at? I saw Dan Ritchie, and then he goes, "Hold on, I got to be right back." And he was going to speak to somebody at, I guess, the University of Florida, asking about the cure that like they had just
That was
the cutting
PMA,
edge.
Orlando PMA, 2022, I think. Yeah.
Yes,
Was
it
it
was.
22?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so that was October. And that was when we found out that it had been approved. That literally was the day at PMA that all of us found out it had finally been approved. And from that approval process, they actually got it commercially available by January. So
Oh.
you're
And so
exactly right.
how is it applied, or how is it
Good question. So originally, okay, this gets back to a personal thing, but
That's
if you've
good.
got a raging biological infection in your body, do you want somebody to spray something on your arm, or do you want a shot?
Oh, take a shot. Yeah.
Okay. The tree is exactly the same way. So they were experimenting with antibiotics or bactericides. They were experimenting with bactericides and spraying them on the trees, but the trees did not want to take it in through their leaves. That was not how the tree internalized a bactericide. When they finally started playing with injection, we figured out how to inject the bactericide into the trunk of the tree. It went all through the tree, killed everything in the tree in about 48 hours.
Wow.
And
48 hours?
done.
Wow.
And
That's
at that
amazing.
point, you've got a sterile tree. Now, how do you keep the tree sterile? That's the process that's going on now, because you get, a month out and the tree's no longer, the disease, all the bactericides worked its way through the tree, right? So now a new psyllid can come along and bite the tree, and you start the process all over again. The disease grows very slowly in the tree, so you gain a lot of, the tree does a lot of recovery in that 1 year, but it's still going to take the tree 3-4 years to really get back to its strength and vitality from where it was. It didn't go down in 1 year. It's not coming back in 1 year. But there is a path forward to a great piece of fruit coming off of a Florida citrus tree again. And that's exciting for everybody still in, including Dan Ritchie.
So what I hear is like the trees are getting vaccinated. Now, will that be something like every year?
Yes, ma'am.
So like a flu shot.
Exactly.
It's something we all know and love.
Flu shot, COVID shot, whatever it is, just give it to me and
Yeah.
Teresa.
The Scylla that's the proper name for the little creature
Psyllid. Psyllid.
Psyllid. Is there any way to detect that prior? I mean, can they inspect the grove and find them, or?
So they are as common as a mosquito in the state of Florida. They're everywhere all the time. You can go in, and one of the early treatments back in 2010, 11, spray your groves and you can eradicate the psyllid. No, you can't. We tried that. We went through an experiment where we sprayed a new grove 52 times a year. Now, in order to do that, you got to use so many different types of chemistry. You've completely wiped out all your integrated pest management. That doesn't even exist anymore. Well, after that 2-year experiment, 100% of our trees were infected. It didn't work.
Yeah.
And so, it's like so many things we tried. It was just, painful to trial, fail. Yeah, it's been a long journey getting back.
No
With-
malathion.
Whatever
ahead,
happened
Teresa.
to using dogs to detect the virus? Is it a virus or a bacteria?
It's a bacteria.
Okay.
Yes, animals can detect it. That's way too late. We like to say with the psyllid, one bite, one dead tree.
Wow.
It's
How big are they? Are they pretty small? Or can you see them with a naked eye?
barely. It's like
So they're like gnats or something like a, yeah.
Yes.
So was there a silver lining insofar as the state was so overplanted with citrus trees that it destroyed the market?
I would tell you no. So we've always had a process in Florida of overproduction, cycling, and everybody hates to be in overproduction. Everybody hates to be in short production. But somehow a freeze, a hurricane, something comes along and kind of levels the playing field for a couple of years. Growers get healthy and you start the cycle again. This was just a perpetual downspin into draining the entire state. And I don't think this acreage, this huge loss of acreage would have happened. Growers love, y'all know this, growers love to grow.
Right.
They don't like selling out. Occasionally you got a piece of property too close to town and dang it, you can't afford to farm anymore. But by and large, if you got hundreds of thousands of acres there, that would still be in agriculture. It would still be in citrus if this disease had not come along, and everybody would still be living in a profitable level with some ups and downs. No, I like the freeze theory a lot better than I do the green theory.
Where did the bacteria come from? It was not originally in the States. It came from overseas, didn't it?
It came from where all good diseases come from.
China.
Yes. Okay, greening is a shortened version. The name is that long, and it's a Chinese name I can't pronounce. I'm not going to try.
We'll stick with greening.
Yes.
Okay.
Do these critters ever bite people, or do they just bite trees?
Strictly trees. Strictly trees. Thank goodness.
And are they attacking the leaves primarily, or do they attack everyone?
They're feeding on the leaves.
Right. Got it. Well, thanks for that science lesson. That was fascinating. I was not expecting. I knew we'd get a little science because I had the greening issue on my question list, but that was really informative, dumbed down for science idiots like me. I understood it. It made a lot of sense, and I learned a little bit about how a tree feeds itself. That's really amazing. I don't think if I ever learned that, I've forgotten it. Okay, well, that was a great lesson. Let's get to this special fruit that I mentioned. There's other things we want to talk about today, but this was the first year I got a chance to try this new fruit that you were inspired to develop. Tell our listeners about this wonderful piece of fruit.
Okay, so our crown jewel in that breeding program is called Noble Juicy Crunch.
Juicy Crunch. What a great
Noble
name.
Juicy Crunch. It is the best tangerine in the world today.
Yep.
And I'm really shy about saying that. No, it's just an amazing flavored piece of fruit. It's bright red, seedless, easy to peel, but it's got a lot of structure to it. The name Juicy Crunch, because it's just that. It's got this crunch, but when you bite it, but then it just explodes with juice. Great high notes, great flavor. I mentioned seedless. And it's a big tangerine. It's going to be 2 to 3 times the size of what you normally think of a cutie or halo type mandarin being.
Right.
So it's truly an amazing piece of fruit. So where did it come from? So you started to hint at this in your introduction.
I didn't want to give the whole story away, but I thought it would entice our listeners to stick around.
It was like 1986 plus or minus, and I'm up in New York City in the middle of the winter. Our Dancy tangerines are in the marketplace, and I'm up there doing the rah-rah with our Dancy tangerines, and one of the buyers says, "Here, I want you to try this piece of fruit. It just came in from Spain. It was in these little wooden cartons with the net cover over the top." And he breaks it open and he hands me a couple. And before I know it's happened, I've peeled and eaten 2 of these things. They're seedless, they're sweet, they're beautiful. I'm going,
Great, I'm happy for you.
I got out of college to sell against this. And this is serious competition. So I came back to Florida and I sat down with my family and I said, here's what's going on. We've got to have, we don't even have anything in the pipeline like this. So we went out to the University of Florida and said, you've got to start breeding for this seedless tangerine, blah, 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 blah. And they go, we're not doing that. We're breeding for new varieties of oranges right now. This is an orange state. So we went to USDA, which is the other institutional breeding program in the state of Florida. USDA goes, we're not doing that. We're breeding for oranges right now. We ain't got time for all your silly tangerine business, okay? At that time, tangerines were like 6 or 7, maybe 8% of the total industry. So it was not a big deal.
Right.
So we switched over. So my sister, who was brilliant at her own, she'd grown up as a scientist, a biologist, a chemist, and we're all in our late 20s, early 30s, right? There's not a bullet with our name on it. We're just bulletproof. We can do anything. And she's got this lab, and she's producing these brand new varieties of Gerber daisies and philodendrons. Okay. Now, I just thought I was good at sales, but I could not sell new varieties of Gerber daisies and philodendrons for nothing. I had nothing for that. She could make them, and I couldn't sell them, and they were just going to the garbage. And this is not a good business plan. So we said, Martha, can you convert the lab over and let's start breeding for new varieties of tangerines? And, 8 or 10 years, we'll have all these new varieties of tangerines. We'll be way out in front of everybody else.
Yeah.
I got this, guys. And so she converts the lab over, and she starts doing all this funky type of crosses, and we bring in these varieties we want, and this characteristic, and that characteristic, blah, blah, blah. It's a bunch of science mumbo jumbo now, but she was doing all these cutting edge techniques back at the time in the late 80s, early 90s. And if I fast forward 30 years after the first step was getting 1,600 unique little plantlets out of the lab. We planted them out on 4 different rootstocks. And then we did something that was really unique in the whole breeding world. Everybody breeds for consumer characteristics, right?
Yeah.
We did not. We spent our first 10 years culling for grower characteristics. Did you produce a lot of fruit? Did you produce it early? Did you produce true to type? Was the fruit good size? Were you resistant to the diseases of the day? Greening was not there, but alternaria, some other diseases of the day. How did you grow off? All these cold, drought. So we culled, after 10 years, we culled down to about 50 remaining plants from 1,600. We went another 8 years with those 50 on 4 different rootstocks, searching for consumer characteristics. Now we got to the consumer characteristics.
Interesting.
We had about 10 that we thought were pretty dang, from really good to we need to give it more time and let's see what's going to happen. 5 of those we ended up planting out in 20 plus acre lots. 2 of those 5, we could never get the fruit to Georgia. They hit all the other characteristics that you like, but they were so tender, we could not get the fruit from Florida to Georgia and have it stay together.
Wow.
3 of them, one was Noble Juicy Crunch, that's our crown jewel. Second is a variety we call Autumn Honey. It's a sister to the Juicy Crunch, but it comes in November, December, late November, December, and it's got anywhere from 6 to 10 seeds. And otherwise, it's got a lot of really beautiful characteristics of its own. It's very hard, firm, great eating.
When you were on the New York market, was that like that was the clementines, right? That you were eating?
Yes. Hunts Point Market. The very first pallets that came in were literally from out of Spain. There were several Spanish shippers that literally were shipping their own labels in. All those guys in the East Coast that were, they're doing the same thing I was doing, gawking at it, going, how do I get my arms around it?
And like that gift box that you described was so cute and so convenient. You just pick it up. It was that was the perfect vessel to sell those things in.
I'm going to tell you a fun story because you just teed it up. So I'm up there, I'm looking at this thing, I'm going, oh my gosh, they're kicking our butts. But look at this little package. I came back to Florida. I patented that package by making it out of cardboard and attaching a net cover with glue to it. And I defended that package against all comers for 20 years. But that was what allowed us to sell out our seedy tangerine varieties. And we had a great run with Wake Fern, ShopRite stores, the entire Ahold group with that 5-pound carton. And while we were selling a seedy tangerine in, we could beat the clementines into the marketplace and we could undercut them in price. So Yeah,
Wow,
that
that is a
that
great
Python
story.
part is a fun story.
And like
for
I
us.
want to say like the retail of it was less than $10, but it was like I don't know, $8.99, 90, like that high single digits was the sweet spot for that.
Yes, and we were able to come in and let them retail at $4.99. Ooh,
Oh, there you go. Yeah.
it
Wow,
was
that's
not a
brilliant.
And that doesn't happen very often that you can like circumvent an established visual that somebody connects with.
Imitation is the greatest form of flattery, right?
Yeah, I had a good friend who had a very successful business, and he says, "You know the secret to my success, Edwin?" He goes, "It's R&D." That's not what you think. He goes, "It's rip off and duplicate."
So
So this new tangerine is actually has its roots in clementines.
No,
Oh, okay.
Not as it's not derived from it. It was just the inspiration for it, right?
yeah, the
Okay.
characteristics that he liked, they
Right.
went and made their own clementine.
so we took
Except
the
I'm
best. Oh, go
I'm
ahead.
sure it tastes different from a clementine, no question.
They are
I don't
better
know.
than
It says,
clementines, let me
well,
tell
it
you.
says it like
Yeah,
it's got 17 bricks. So
yeah. That's the
It's
bricks.
a true, and I'm sorry, it's only available late, like starting at Christmas. And normally, without hurricanes, we would have gone probably through mid to late February. This year, it was pretty much off the shelves by the 1st of February this year.
So they're
see,
not
but that's the
available.
perfect time, I think, because for me, because I was introduced to clementines in New York, like that's the time of year, Thanksgiving on, like that's the time of year that I look to buy that.
It's a We're going to have a lot of fun over the decades coming up. It's a unique variety. We're getting growers to plant it now. At first, it was, what do you mean plant something new? We got greening. How the
Yeah.
heck can you even think about planting something new with greening? And so we had to overcome greening and this whole challenge in the marketplace. But um, this is also interesting. You all familiar with sumo in California?
Yep.
Mhm.
We had them on a week ago. So,
Okay, well, I don't know if they'll talk this good about us, but I'll talk this good about them. Um, they have been masters at rolling that variety out. They recognized what they had early on. They created distinction. They gave it its own identity. They
Yeah.
priced it like they should have priced it. They didn't cheap it out. They didn't
Right.
throw it away, and they made it special. And then they celebrated it every single year. What a model. And
Yeah.
when we came along, we said, once again, what's your greatest form of
Yeah.
flattery?
Whatever they're doing, we're going to do it.
And our mission was to get to their pricing as fast as the market would let us. We got there last year. I'm sure all your readers won't, or all your audience won't love to hear that, but we actually, in the East Coast, we did a lot of face-to-face competition. Sumo doesn't know this, or maybe they
No.
do. I don't know.
Yeah.
But we were soundly beating them 2-1, 3-1 in the Southeast market. So
Yeah.
I'm not going to take the rest of the country away from them, but
As a consumer, I'll pay the VIG if you deliver what you say. So the sumos, like beginning of the season, I won't necessarily go there, but like when they start rocking and rolling, then I'll pay that. And the same with this, like it's, like the little boxes, like we'll pay $8-9 if I know that every piece is not gonna scratch the enamel off my teeth and like be sour. If it's sweet, I'm in.
yes.
And I can't be any different than like when I go into the produce department, I become a consumer. I forget everything other than I'm so finicky about my produce, but I forget everything and I don't necessarily know the price or, oh, that's expensive or it's not. But like I want my broccoli. I want whatever my staples are.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's very interesting. The sumos I just tasted. The first time I tried the Juicy Crunch was this week, and so the Sumos I've known for several years. They're both great tasting pieces of fruit, very sweet, but your tangerine, the Juicy Noble, that juicy part of it is where you beat the Sumo, in my opinion. And one thing I don't think you mentioned is that these, especially for Florida citrus, these are very easy to peel. They don't have that real thick zipper skin, as they call it. But boy, you just pop the little from the top, and it just comes right off. Very thin skin, but it comes right off. So that was another thing that I was surprised about.
I have to tell y'all, the hurricane that Teresa, we went through last year.
Yes.
Between Irma and Ian, those were both 100-year hurricanes. Ian, even more so than Irma. I know that's hard to believe, but from what it did to the trees, the ability for us to recover, we're dealing with the second year of what we call hurricane hangover. And it left these trees horribly traumatized. All the citrus trees that were in the path of that storm, you're talking about a storm that was over 100 miles wide, a storm that gave us over 24 hours of 100-mile-an-hour winds.
Wow.
What that does to a tree is just shake it as hard as you can shake it for 24 hours.
Right.
Blowing crazy. So you're breaking off all these capillary roots. Okay. What did greening do to the trees? All those roots. Okay. You were just starting to get the trees coming back, and you've just taken those trees and just shook them and broken everything off that's back there. So you've got a horribly traumatized tree underneath. Where do the trees store their carbohydrates? 50% of them are stored in the roots, right? Where are the other 50% of the carbohydrates stored? In the leaves. What happened to 24 hours in that 100-mile-an-hour wind?
100% of the tree was like beat up.
Yes, so
all
you
the
lost
leaves are stripped off.
from 60 to 100% of the leaves off the tree. So these trees were literally starting from nothing. And this was the 1st of October that storm, it was last day of September, right? So 1st of October, we got no recovery time. We got no time for that tree to rebuild any carbohydrates before it wants to bloom again, because it's going to go dormant in the winter. You get to springtime, and March is our bloom time, right? In March, that tree is sitting there going, I ain't got much left, but whatever I got, I'm going to put some fruit on, dang it. I'll grow some leaves later on. Well, it did. It put on a crop because it's an organism. And when an organism gets threatened, what does it do? It reproduces. Okay. So that tree had a mission. I have got to grow this crop of fruit until those seeds are viable. Once those seeds are viable, I'll let the fruit go. Doesn't matter if it's ripe or not. Literally, we grew that crop of fruit. We thought we were sitting here with this windfall crop coming on, beautiful on the tree all summer long. We got into September, October, we're rubbing our hands. We're so excited as farmers. You know how excited farmers can get. And all of a sudden, that tree started determining that it had viable seeds in that fruit, and it cut it loose. And we lost 50% of this crop within a month of harvest, straight to the ground for no reason other than the tree just ran out of steam. Nothing we could do about it. It was just a bloody disaster. So I'm glad you got to try some good fruit, but it was only about half of what the trees really tried to produce.
Oh, interesting. Well, again, this is an eye-opening, real interesting lesson. I'm sorry you've gone through it, but it's really eye-opening to hear about the biology of these fruit trees. It's a really amazing, interesting subject. Let's move on to some of the other things you grow. Other than tangerines, you have another very interesting citrus fruit. It is a pomelo. Tell us, first of all, I think most of our listeners probably have heard of or know what a pomelo is, but tell them what a pomelo is and what it looks like.
So there's a lot of different ways to say this variety. There's a lot of different ways to spell this variety. We stepped out and we call it a pomelo.
Pomelo. Okay, I'm sorry.
And don't get me wrong. What you said was perfectly right. There is no wrong.
It's like
We even
pecans and pecans. Pecans and pecans. Okay.
We even spell it differently. We spell it Pummelo.
Okay.
So we spell it like we say it.
All right.
But this piece of fruit is so cool. There are so many different varieties of pomelos. And what we did was we selected for a variety that did really, really well in our Florida soils. And that's not true of all the varieties. We tested hundreds of them, and we got one that is just really, really cool. It's really easy to create new varieties of pomelos. It's as easy as throwing out a seed. So pomelos were one of the original citrus varieties.
Right.
Pomelo and mandarin.
Yep.
All oranges, all grapefruit, all lemons, all everything came from an original pomelo and original lemon, mandarin. And guess what country?
China.
Where all good things come from. Actually, Southeast Asia. We can't definitively say it was China or Vietnam or Cambodia, but somewhere in that
region. Yeah.
Breeding ground. But the pomelo is one of those mother fruits, if you will, in the citrus industry. So getting new varieties, the only way you get it true to type is by budding. And when you find something you like, lock onto it and make sure you do a good job of working that mother tree, because it's real easy to get sports. It's real easy to get oddball stuff coming off of it. So this pomelo, we call it the Florida Starburst pomelo. It's as big as your head. In that
My head's pretty big, Quentin.
When you start talking about a standard Florida citrus container, 4/5 carton, or what we used to call a 40-pound or 36-pound, whatever. I start talking about counts that we have a 4 count, a 5 count, a 6 count.
Wow.
They go on down to a 14 count.
Wow.
14 is about the smallest we sell in pomelos. Okay, now that's
in comparison, an orange in that same box could be as high as what, 80?
You in navels, you would get up to a very large navel would be a 48 size navel. Okay. In grapefruit, a very large grapefruit, the largest grapefruit you're going to find out of Florida is a 23.
Yeah.
That's still two sizes. It goes 23, 18, 14.
Yeah.
So you're still, at the very smallest, you're still much larger than the biggest grapefruit.
Who are you selling those to?
Sounds like you have more air in the box than pomelos.
That's a great sales strategy, by the way. Air is the best thing to sell. Sorry.
Very profitable.
So who buys those?
So it's always been a well-known commodity product in the Asian communities all over the United States. So, and it's been interesting how they've found us and we've found them over the last 25 years. But more importantly for us is 22 or 3 years ago, our first retail customer was Publix. And they said, we'll try a few. They've been very good. Publix has been very good to us for a long time. And they experimented with us. We tried, and we finally, in the early 2000s, we developed a star label. So it's got the shape of a big star. And if you'll see it in Publix, it's September through December. So we're obviously past that season now, but it's a big star, and on the star, it tells you how to eat it, what it is. Each leg of the star tells you a different characteristic. And so that started turning on a Caucasian population, or I'll say a non-Asian population. And we've organically grown that non-Asian population to where we literally sell pomelos to most of the retailers in the Eastern United States. And more recently, we've opened up the Western United States, introducing them. California does produce a pomelo, but it's green, and it stays green until generally sometime right about now when they start to color up, and they'll color up from now through May. So we have this bright yellow pomelo all fall long, looks like a giant grapefruit on steroids. Shouldn't even mention that word, but they're just like a giant oversized grapefruit. They're super sweet. They're lower in acid, higher in bricks than grapefruit. They got great high notes, completely different high notes than grapefruit have. You look like you're going to bite into a grapefruit. It'll completely change your outlook on what.
What's the bricks level?
We'll run in the 11 to 13 brick range, so early to late.
Yeah.
So it's a high
How
brick.
how does it compare to the California pomelo in
The
flavor?
California pomelo, it is a much inferior piece of fruit to the Florida one. It's got a much thicker peel.
Mhm.
And guess what has the thickest peel of all? A pomelo from
China.
For once, I think this is the first time that Florida's got the thinnest peel. Shocking.
It is crazy. But no, you think about it, all Florida peels are thinner than other places because we have much higher juice content. And that's what happens in our subtropical climate, where we're getting that 60 to 70 inches of rain a year. We're going to have a lot more juice, which pushes out and thins out the peel. So we got a lot more juice in our fruit than California, where they had desert arid climate and then they have monsoons. No, they had desert arid climate, and where they grow the Chinese pomelo, I don't know if they just pick them early. I just don't know what happens, but they come in with a peel that's literally that thick. That you could have a
2 or 3
Chinese
inches.
pomelo that big with a meat center that big. It's horrible, and it's terrible tasting.
Okay, well, we've probably taken enough of your time. I'm sure you're very busy. It's been a real pleasure. I learned so much today. I knew I'd learned something, but I did not know how deep it would be. So we really appreciate you being on the show. Now, we do have a ritual here, if Teresa's ready for it.
Oh, am I ready?
So all of our guests, Quentin, they pay for being on the show by going through this tortuous ritual that you're going to have to endure. And, you know, it's not as bad as greening, but in some ways it's pretty bad. So here's the deal. We have a segment every episode, and Teresa loves her puns. So she always comes up with a pun to tell us on the show. We call this segment Home Grown because they're always bad. You can't laugh at it. You got to just groan because they're so bad. And it's usually in the form of a question. She puts out a question, not always, but usually. And we try to guess what the pun is going to be. So if you're ready, Quentin, to be tortured, to be punished.
Wow.
We got to go. All right.
Just wow.
Here we go. All right. I'm going to introduce it. Okay, Produce Buzzers podcast fans, it's time for your favorite segment on the Produce Buzzers podcast. Yes, it's time for Home Grown. Yeah, now don't run away from your podcast. Don't turn the volume down. Don't shut it off. You have to stay and be punished with the homegrown. Teresa, what is our homegrown for this week?
Why did the tangerine have to go to the doctor?
Okay. All right. Well, I'll repeat the question. We got to each try to guess what this might be. So, why did the tangerine have to go to the doctor? Is that it?
That's it?
Well, let's see. Okay, Rick, come on. You always have something good. You always come with something good.
Because he thought he might have greening disease?
No.
Cynthia, you got a guess?
I don't know. Like, because I don't know. Because he didn't get his apple a day.
No.
How about you, Quentin? You got any guesses?
I'm gonna say it has something. I can't pull it together, but it's got something to do with getting peeled.
Oh, okay.
He was very appealing. Okay, I have no guess. I'm very bad at these. So, Teresa, why did the tangerine have to go to the doctor?
He wasn't peeling well.
Oh,
No, where's the laugh? There's nothing.
Nicely done.
That's terrible. Oh, man.
You can't
Sometimes
grow
she
with
has
that.
a good one, but not today. That was terrible. I'm sorry, Quentin, but that's your payment for being on the show.
thank you for allowing me to play.
No
One
good
of my-
deed goes unpunished.
So one of my favorite songs ever is Tangerine. You must know that one, Quentin, the old jazz standard, Tangerine.
Oh,
Tangerine, na 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 na. You got to look that up.
Come on, Rick. Come on.
I don't think I've ever heard it before.
Yeah.
I bet you if you heard it, you would remember it.
What
Yeah.
time era was that?
1940s is when it came
We
out.
listen to that kind of music all the time, the 30s and 40s music.
I'm sure if you heard it, you would go, "Oh yes,
Yeah.
I remember that tune." I was
Yeah.
terrible at singing it, so.
Tangerine, she is all the rage.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
so
You know,
this-
Edwin, you may not remember, but during the 80s when we had our produce market in Charlotte,
Oh,
we loaded a lot of Noble tangerines and oranges.
well, that's interesting. You know, I
This
had
is
forgotten.
just now occurring to you.
Well,
Rick?
my memory is
I was trying to work it in
We've been on
earlier.
there for 2 hours. And he's like, oh, wait a minute.
Yeah,
Rick's
we
got much better. Rick is older
I can't
than me,
remember
but he's got
which,
much better memory than me.
which produce company on the Columbia State Farmers Market primarily handled your citrus back in the
Sin
80s?
Brothers,
Yes,
Sin Brothers. Yeah.
Raymond and
VB Hook or Sin Brothers. They both were
yeah.
there.
So yeah, we sold a lot of even when a lot of people wanted the Indian River citrus. If my memory serves me, I think that we
Disclaimer
did
right there.
a lot of Noble oranges back then and grapefruit.
Yeah.
And
We're-
people couldn't tell the difference in the Indian River and that. I don't think nobody ever commented that there was any difference.
We were a little unique in that half of our grapefruit volume was interior and half of our grapefruit volume was Indian River.
Oh, okay.
Oh, okay.
So they may have been using the Indian River fruit since it was so popular in the Carolinas.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Great. Well, that's interesting, Rick. I'm glad you remembered that. Thanks again, Quentin. Really was a pleasure.
Quentin, you're a natural for this. You really are good. And
Yeah.
we really appreciate you being here.
Well, thank you. I've enjoyed this. It's been a lot of fun.
Yeah.
I'm glad you did. It's been a good one. We've learned a lot. We've had some laughs, and we really appreciate you taking the extra time too. I know we were almost on 2 hours, so I didn't mean to take that much time. But good
Thank
luck.
you all. Good.
Thank
good
you
to
very
meet you all.
much.
Great.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Well, thank you, listeners, for tuning in to the Produce Buzzers podcast, brought to you by Produce Buzz, the gathering place for lovers of fresh fruits and veggies. We hope you were entertained a bit and educated a lot about fresh produce. Be sure to join us next time, and please tell your friends to do so as well. Like, share, and comment on our Produce Buzz Facebook page. And check out our website at www.producebuzz.com. There you will find articles about fresh fruits and veggies, how to select, store, and prepare them, as well as lots of interesting facts about all the wonderful bounty the earth provides for us. Until next time, be fruitful and don't forget to veg out.